So to start with how it ties in, um, ACT is founded on a experimental analysis theory called Relational Frame Theory. And Relational Frame Theory is a continuation of B.F. Skinner's or verbal operants. Now, some people are probably, who are behavior analysts and know about this stuff, are probably screaming because they're like, it's not the same. And so there's some camps out there. There's some people who are saying it's totally different, and others that are saying it's the same.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what happens in science. You have disagreements, and that's cool. I love it. Me personally, I see it as a continuation and a beneficial continuation. Um, but the premise of relational frame theory is that we make relational connections between things. So probably the best example is, think of a song that you loved at one point, and then something tragic in your life happened, and now that when you hear that song, it brings you pain.
Mm.
That is our relational frame, relational networks in our brain, making those connections. And that actually leads beautifully into explaining the first concept in ACT, which is called cognitive or verbal fusion. And that's the idea that we fuse, F-U-S-E, or fusion, F-U-S-I-O-N, with an idea and an emotion. We connect those two together. And then when we get those two things connected together, that results in us being stuck, or it results in us solving problems. Because the reason why this relational frame is such a big deal is because we solve problems. The fact that you and I can talk to each other across the world over electricity being turned on and off, because that's what ones and zeros are, is the one is the electricity on, and zero is electricity off, and we can have an amazing conversation that's recorded and that can be distributed to other people, is because somebody took this idea that seemingly was unconnected and connected with this other idea that was seemingly unconnected, and we discovered something new. And it's a wonderful thing, but it's also the source of our pain and suffering. And so the core premise of acceptance commitment therapy is that life is filled with pain, and that's inevitable. But it doesn't have to be filled with suffering. And so this is where diffusion comes in. So think fusion, but diffusion, D-E-F-U-S-I-O-N. Yeah, diffusion.
Mm-hmm.
It's the ability to disconnect the feeling and the idea from each other. And there's a couple different techniques. And the thing that I love about ACT is that there are so many ways to do it. And you find your way. There's no wrong or right way, as long as you accomplish the thing. I diffuse through humor. I love making jokes. But you can use a diffusion technique to avoid the pain, which will instead, it will backfire. Because the next part of the process is, once you've diffused, you have to accept. And acceptance isn't something that is easy. It's easy to describe, but it's not easy to do. And the easiest way that I've come up with describing acceptance is walking downstairs. When you first start walking downstairs, it's scary. It is frightening, because you have to fall forward. You have to let your step go down. And you could certainly control your muscles every step of the way, but that would be exhausting. So you have to accept that there comes a point where it just has to happen. And interestingly, when you diffuse and you accept, it not only deals with emotional pain, but it can actually alter physical pain. There's been research that's been done with ACT on burn victims. And without painkillers, they have significantly reduced, I don't remember the exact estimated percentage, but significantly reduced the pain that these people who are dealing with something that's horrific are actually experiencing.
Could you actually just go back to diffusion? And give me another example. So you said that you use humor.
Hmm.
What's another way to diffuse?
So another way to diffuse is to, so we all have that inner voice, that inner judge that's telling us something. So you can perceive that thing, that voice, and you can sing it as a song. So, like for example, I know somebody who they like using "Happy Birthday," the song "Happy Birthday." So they'll, "You're really stupid. You can't do this. You are going to fail, and it's gonna be okay." Like something like that, where it's basically allowing yourself to have some distance. And so another way to diffuse is um, to take a short phrase or word and try to embody all the emotion into it, and
Hmm.
then repeat that thing once per second for 35 to 40 seconds. Which that's actually one of the research, the studies that they've done on that to see how consistently. Um, so if for example, I have a fear of getting in the car because I got into a really bad car accident. That's not me, but that's a
Hmm.
that's a very real fear. So if I were to say car, 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 all the way through the 40 seconds, by the time that time is done, it just turns into R. That's it in my mouth, and the emotion is pulled away from it.
Okay.
And if you go out there, there's the world's longest running Yahoo group is an acceptance and commitment therapy, continuously running Yahoo group is an acceptance and commitment therapy group. There's tons of Facebook groups, forums, chats. I know there's folks on Reddit. Um, this massive community of people who are wanting to support and help each other and share how they diffuse, how they accept all these different things. And it's wonderful because the research has actually shown that um, you don't need a therapist to use ACT.
Hmm.
The outcomes, as long as you're consistently practicing, the outcomes are pretty much the same. And if you have somebody who can support you and encourage you to do it, then the outcomes get better
Hmm.
because you're learning how to use these skills. And literally, there's 6 discrete, observable skills that can be done. That if you consistently practice and use them once a week, once a day, whatever you want to do, um, you're going to increase your psychological flexibility and strength. And so a lot of people assume that behavior analysis is behaviorist. We don't believe thoughts, feelings, emotions, memories, those sorts of things are behavior, and that's a mistake because there was a behaviorism that came before radical behaviorism called methodological behaviorists, and they said if you can't observe it, it's not a behavior. And the reason why B.F. Skinner was radical and those that followed him is because we're like, no, those are behaviors. Those are real things. Like just because the observer is one person doesn't mean that it's not a thing. And that's the reason that RFT and by relation ACT was able to be developed was
Hmm.
because the question was asked. Now, I like to say that ACT is the baby of behavior analysis and cognitive behavioral therapy because there's a lot of ideas that CBT um, has that were right because theorizing and those sorts of things, and so there's kind of a partnership that's going on there, and so cognitive behavioral therapists who have training in ACT are capable of providing that. But the principal researcher and founder of ACT, Stephen C. Hayes, I was introduced to ACT at an ACT conference for behavior analysts, and somebody asked about whether or not Dr. Hayes would expect there to be licensure requirements um, for ACT, and his response was, "Why?" because he doesn't want it to be limited. He wants people to access this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And all the ACT folks, the specialists that I talk to and I learn from it, I am by no means a specialist. I am not an expert on this, but I'm learning and I'm passionate. And that's the key,
Mm-hmm.
is you don't need to be an expert to learn and to apply.
Yeah.
And I make sure that all this stuff that I'm talking about, I'm applying with all my kids. Doesn't matter if they're non-vocal, doesn't matter if they're a little kid, doesn't matter if they're a teenager or a tween. It's always being applied, and I'm always looking for ways of helping these kids learn these skills, because heaven help me, if I had had that skill as a kid, I wouldn't have been at that place where there was a knife to my wrist.
Mm.
But the flip side of that is, if I hadn't have been in that place where that knife was at my wrist, I wouldn't be able to have the compassion and understanding I have now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there's my time traveling.
You've been watching Autism Knows No Borders. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. Also, we'd love to hear from you, so let us know what you think in the comments section. Click here to watch this interview in its entirety. You can also find us on your favorite podcast app. Tune in each week for engaging conversations of how people across the globe are inspiring change and building community. Thanks for watching. Take care.